wondered whether or not the New Deal was unpopular? Well, you're about to find out as we go on a tour of the history of Lexington.
This is the place where 240 years ago, the famous first shots were fired in what would become the American War for Independence. At this battle green, 81 years ago, Lexingtonians gathered in protest of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal policies, specifically one regarding the National Recovery Administration.
Well, Zach, Lexington actually looked somewhat more like this in 1934 when the protests occurred.
In a purposeful move, the protest occurred on April 19th, exactly 159 years after the first shot was fired. A petition signed by 1,200 people was read on the green and was also presented to Congress the same day. Crucial to the social success of the petition and its ability to provoke national attention was its connection to the historically significant Lexington and pre-war of independence grievances. But before diving into the specifics of the petition, we need some background.
Lexington was fairly conservative throughout the 1930s. For example, in the 1932 elections, Herbert Hoover, the Republican candidate, won 67% of the town's votes. A majority of office holders and business people were Republicans as well. As a result, there was strong animosity towards Roosevelt's comparatively liberal New Deal policies.
Yes, there was. In fact, the petition was supported by the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, who was the one to read it on the green, and the town newspaper endorsed it. These pieces of information show that both the town's political power and the town's social power backed up the petition. What exactly were the Lexingtonians' grievances? Well, there were a couple. First, they protested against federal interference in business under the guise of economic recovery, as well as the mounting national debt as a result of government spending. They were strongly opposed to increased power and bureaucracy of the government. Many of their grievances were alike to those the colonists held leading up to the Battle of Lexington. Their thirst for independence from an overbearing central government infringing on their economic liberty was much the same as the colonists protesting taxation and various British acts, like the Stamp Act, Sugar Act, and the Declaratory Act. If the 1920s pro-business stance was salutary neglect, allowing for uncontrolled trade, then FDR's New Deal policies were the Parliament's acts enforcing new restrictive laws on trade and levying taxes.
That's an astute observation, Zach. Great synthesis. The similarities between these two time periods were noticed by the petitioners, who flanked themselves with militiamen reenactors to emphasize the connection. But before we get to the success of the petition, we should discuss in greater detail what the New Deal did to provoke this protest. Many of the New Deal's policies were initially passed as emergency measures to counteract the Great Depression that had set upon the country. However, Lexington was rather affluent and did not feel the same hardships other towns and communities faced. Thus, they felt that there was no longer any emergency and disputed further measures taken by Roosevelt. The last straw for Lexington was the creation of the National Recovery Administration under the National Industrial Recovery Act. Honestly, similarities between the NRA and British Crown aren't as strong as Lexingtonians like to have thought. The NRA established codes of fair practice to enhance competition between companies while aiding their workers, forwarding unionization through addressing working hours and wages.
Although, to be fair, businesses adhering to NRA codes brandished the Blue Eagle, making it easy for supporters to boycott anti-NRA shops, just as the crime enforced stamping written documents, from letters to playing cards.
Yes, Manu, that is true. But the overall spirit of the NRA was to help out the little guy, helping to fix prices and protect their wages and working conditions. That's something the colonists would have supported, because it encouraged representation of the worker.
Regardless, connections drawn between the two were intentional and influential. In the petition, they noted the anniversary of the first battle for American liberty, reviving a historical practice through petitioning this infringement on their liberty. In 1981, Lawrence Reed, senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and extreme proponent of the free market, echoed some of the worries that Lexington held, calling the NRA the most radical aspect of FDR's New Deal. Reminiscent of the Tea Party, Reed defended this rebellious tailor who disobeyed fixed prices. This live free or rebel policy resonated with Lexington, and this connection to the revolution resonated with the rest of the country. From Connecticut to Georgia, news of Lexington's protest spread nationwide.
The media attention was one of the successes of the protest, and what might be the most remarkable about the nation's response is that Representative Rogers read the entire petition and all the names attached into the congressional record the very same day it was read on the green. This is particularly impressive, as the sheer number of protests happening across the country made it difficult to gain recognition on the House floor, let alone have an entire petition read.
A news reporter for Springfield, Massachusetts, Peg Rogers, is nothing more than a political opportunist, and the citizens of Lexington is ingrates and foolish nobodies. But as they say, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Lexington was still able to pick up the support of Rogers, as well as Congressman James Wadsworth of New York, and still gained enough attention for towns like Springfield, Malone, New York, and Waterbury, Connecticut, to issue jealous, petty responses. None of this would have been national news were it not for Lexington's historical significance.
Right on, Manu. That's proven by all the other protests happening around the country during this time, few of which gained comparable recognition.
Well, I think that about covers it. What do you say?
Let's do a quick summary.
Lexington was... Oh, sorry, after you.
No, you go, please.
No, I cut you off. Please go ahead.
No, I'm sure you had it all planned out.
Hurry up, fellas, we're running out of time. Look, I'll go. FDR pushed the National Industrial Recovery Act, which led to the creation of the National Recovery Administration. This was the final straw for Lexingtonians, who were for the most part conservative and against governmental interference on business. They led a protest in 1934, but its potential for making news increased vastly with the protesters' choice to tie Lexington's colonial history into the protest, drawing connections between our founding fathers' cries for liberty and their own grievances, as well as using the battle green to represent a starting point for resistance against a central government.
That was beautiful, Richard.
Simply magnificent. Thank you all for listening.
3, 2, 1, let's go!